I'd always loved solo road trips. There was something freeing about being out on the open road, just me, the car, and the endless miles stretching ahead. This trip was meant to be a long one, cutting across several states, a chance to clear my head and see a bit of the country I hadn't before. I'd packed light, had my routes planned, and felt ready for the adventure. The first few days were exactly what I needed: long stretches of highway, small-town diners, and the quiet satisfaction of being completely self-sufficient. It was late afternoon on the fourth day when things started to go wrong. I was on a long, empty stretch of highway, just trees on either side, miles from the nearest town, when my car started making a noise I didn't like, a sort of sputtering that grew steadily worse. I tried to ignore it for a while, hoping it would just stop, but eventually, there was no choice but to pull over. I coasted to a stop on the shoulder, the car signed to a halt like a tired animal. There wasn't much around, just the dense woods pressing in close and the gray ribbon of the road behind me, empty as far as I could see. I popped the bonnet and stared blankly at the engine. I knew next to nothing about car mechanics. Poking around felt pointless, but admitting I was helpless felt worse. I was just killing time, really, hoping another car might come by, or maybe I'd suddenly figure out the issue. The silence out here was heavy, broken only by the buzzing of insects and the rustling of leaves in a barely there breeze. About 20 minutes later, while I was still pretending to look knowledgeable under the hood, I saw a vehicle in my rearview mirror, a dark-colored pickup truck. It slowed down as it approached, pulling over a little way behind me. Relief washed over me, quickly followed by a prickle of unease. The truck just sat there for a minute, too far away to make out the driver, the engine idling. Then, very slowly, a figure emerged from the driver's side. A man. He didn't look like anyone I expected, not a mechanic, not a friendly local. He was wearing faded, dark clothing and a worn baseball cap pulled low, obscuring his face. He didn't wave or call out. He just started walking towards me, slow and deliberate, never taking his eyes off me. My instinct screamed at me to get in the car and lock the doors, even though it wasn't running. But he was already halfway to me. I stayed put, trying to appear calm, though my heart had started to hammer against my ribs. As he got closer, I could see his eyes under the brim of his cap, wide, too wide, and unsettlingly still. He stopped a few feet away, just outside the car door. He didn't speak for a moment, just looked at me, then at the disabled car. "Trouble?" he asked, his voice flat, emotionless. "Yeah, just broke down," I managed to say, trying to keep my voice steady. "Waiting for a tow, I guess." I lied about the tow truck, hoping the idea someone was coming might deter him. He didn't acknowledge my lie. He just kept staring, his gaze lingering on me in a way that made my skin crawl. It reminded me of the unsettling stares I'd felt from strangers before, the kind that made you feel like prey. "Mile or two down the road," he said eventually, his voice still monotone. "There's an old place. Maybe you could wait there. Get out of the sun." He pointed back the way he'd come, towards the south. I hadn't seen anything but trees for miles. The idea of a nearby building, even an old one, was tempting, but something about him, the way he stood, the deadness in his eyes, felt profoundly wrong. It was the same feeling I got from that guy in the diner, or the one who showed up in the hot tub, just off. Deeply unsettling. "Oh, thanks," I said quickly, trying to sound appreciative while also trying to signal I wasn't interested. "I think I'll just wait here for the tow truck. Should be here soon." He didn't react visibly, but the silence stretched, becoming heavier, more menacing. He didn't move. He just stood there, watching me. I could feel the heat of his gaze. I wanted to run, but where would I go? The woods looked impenetrable, and the road was empty. My car was useless. "Suit yourself," he finally said, still flat, still staring. He took a step back, then turned and walked back to his truck with the same slow, deliberate pace. He got in, and after another long minute, the truck pulled away, driving back down the road the way it had come. I watched it until it disappeared from sight. My hands were shaking. What was that? My mind raced, trying to find a rational explanation. Just a weird local, maybe? But the unease didn't dissipate. If anything, it intensified. That feeling, it wasn't just awkwardness. It felt predatory. I knew I couldn't stay here all night. The sun was starting to dip below the trees, casting long, eerie shadows. The air was growing colder. I locked my car doors and decided to walk. Maybe I could find that place he mentioned, or at least get a signal on my phone. I didn't want to go in the direction he came from, but it was the only lead I had. Armed with my phone and a small torch from my bag, I started walking south along the shoulder of the road, constantly glancing back and into the woods. The walk felt longer than a mile or two. The woods seemed to press in closer as dusk deepened, the trees becoming dark, towering silhouettes against the fading light. Every snap of a twig, every rustle in the undergrowth made me jump. I thought about the stories I'd heard, the ones about people disappearing in the wilderness, about strange encounters far from anywhere. Just as the last light was fading, I saw it. Tucked back from the road, barely visible through a screen of trees, was a building. It looked old, dilapidated, maybe a cabin or a small, abandoned house. It had that look of neglect, like the boarded-up houses in the demolition block or the abandoned village. There was no smoke from a chimney, no lights on. It looked completely deserted. Relief, tentative but real, flickered within me. At least it was shelter. I left the road and pushed through the brush towards the building. The grass was long, tangled. As I got closer, I saw it wasn't boarded up, but the windows were dark and grimy, the paint peeling from the walls. The front door sagged open slightly. A wave of musty, stale air greeted me as I pushed it open fully and stepped inside. The inside was dark and cold. My torch beam cut through the gloom, revealing a single large room. Dust motes danced in the light. There was old, broken furniture scattered around, a collapsed chair, a table with one leg missing. It looked like it had been abandoned for years. But as I swept my torch beam around, I noticed something that didn't fit the picture of long-term abandonment. In one corner, there was a small area that looked recently used. A makeshift fire pit with fresh-looking ash, a few empty water bottles, some food wrappers. And tied to the wall nearby, a collection of things. Twisted metal objects, rags tied into knots, and something that looked disturbingly like a child's doll, its face melted and warped. It immediately reminded me of the bizarre campsite described in one of the stories, the one with the shopping carts tied to trees and the charred duck ornament with the doll. This wasn't just someone roughing it. This felt deliberate, ritualistic even. A knot of fear tightened in my stomach. Had the man directed me here? Was this his place? My mind reeled. I backed away from the corner, my torch beam sweeping nervously around the room. I needed to leave, get back to the road, but it was pitch black outside now. The woods seemed even more terrifying in the darkness. I was stuck. I found a spot away from the disturbing corner, near the sagged door, where I could keep an eye on the entrance. I pulled out my phone again, desperately hoping for a signal. Nothing. Not a single bar. I checked the time. It was late. I had to try and make it through the night. I sat in the darkness, the only light coming from my small torch, which I used sparingly to conserve the battery. Every creak of the old house, every whisper of the wind outside, made me jump. My ears strained, listening for any sound that wasn't the natural settling of the building or the wind in the trees. After what felt like hours, I heard it. A faint sound from outside. Footsteps. They were light, quick footsteps, circling the cabin. Not the heavy tread of an animal. Definitely human. They sounded like they were trying to be quiet, but the dry leaves and twigs on the ground betrayed their presence. My blood ran cold. Someone was out there. Was it the man from the truck? Were there more of them? The thought of the multiple, unsynchronized footsteps in another story flashed into my mind. I froze, barely daring to breathe. The footsteps circled the cabin, slow and deliberate, pausing at the windows, then moving on. They came closer to the door, lingered, and then moved away again. It felt like they were checking, seeing if anyone was inside, or maybe just letting me know they were there. It was pure psychological torment. Then, the footsteps stopped. Total silence outside. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The sudden quiet was almost worse than the noise. My heart pounded in my ears. I stayed completely still, listening. After another agonizing minute, I heard a new sound. A low, eerie whistling, coming from the edge of the woods. It was slow, haunting, the kind of tune that chills you to the bone. It felt deliberate, like a signal, or like they were just messing with me. The whistling stopped, and then the footsteps started again, this time seeming faster, more erratic. I couldn't stay here, not with that out there. My body finally snapped into motion, propelled by pure terror. I scrambled to my feet, my legs shaky. Running out the door seemed like suicide. Hiding somewhere inside felt equally pointless in this small, broken-down place. The back of the cabin? Maybe there was another way out. I crept towards the back wall, torch off, my hands outstretched in the darkness. I stumbled over something on the floor, stifling a yelp. The footsteps outside seemed to quicken. They knew I was awake, moving. I found a small window at the back. It was stuck fast. I couldn't open it. Panic started to set in. I felt trapped, like Tatum in the garage trying to fit through the pet door. There had to be another way. The footsteps were closer now, heavy, right outside the front door. I heard a slight pressure against the wood. Someone was leaning on it, or maybe trying the handle. The sagging door groaned softly. Acting purely on instinct, I turned and ran towards the front of the cabin, towards the open door. It felt counterintuitive, running towards the threat, but it was the only exit. I burst out of the cabin and into the absolute blackness of the night. I didn't stop to look back. I ran as fast as I could, crashing through the brush, heading vaguely towards where I thought the road was. Branches whipped at my face and arms. The ground was uneven, treacherous. Behind me, I could hear them. Multiple sets of footsteps, crashing through the woods, not far behind. They weren't trying to be quiet anymore. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs screamed in protest. I didn't think I could run any further. I dove behind a thick cluster of trees, burying myself in the undergrowth, trying to disappear. I pulled leaves and dirt over myself, pressing myself flat against the cold ground. I held my breath, listening. The footsteps pounded closer, then seemed to spread out, searching. I could hear them moving back and forth, voices calling out softly, too far away to make out the words, but the tone was clear. They were looking for me. It felt like an eternity. I lay there, cold, terrified, barely breathing. Slowly, gradually, the sounds faded. The voices, the footsteps, grew more distant, until I could hear nothing but the sounds of the night forest returning to its normal state. Had they given up? Or were they just waiting? I didn't move for a very long time. When I finally dared to crawl out from my hiding place, the sky was beginning to lighten. I was covered in dirt and scratches, my body aching. I moved slowly, cautiously, trying to get my bearings. Finding the road again took another hour of careful, nerve-wracking movement through the thinning woods. When I finally stumbled back onto the familiar asphalt, I felt a wave of exhaustion and relief so profound it nearly brought me to my knees. My car was still there, untouched. My phone still had no signal. I knew I needed to get help, tell someone what happened. I started walking, this time south on the road, determined to reach the next town. The walk felt surreal after the night I'd had. After what felt like a lifetime, I saw signs of civilization, a gas station, a few buildings. I practically ran to the gas station and found a working payphone, my hands still shaking as I dialed the police. I told them everything. The car trouble, the strange man, the abandoned cabin, the disturbing things I found inside, the footsteps, the whistling, being chased through the woods. They listened, asked questions, and said they would send an officer out to check the area, specifically the cabin. They took my details, where I was from, where I was heading. An officer arrived about an hour later. He listened to my story again, seemingly taking notes, but his expression was non-committal. He drove me back to my car. It was still there. He had another officer check the cabin while we waited. About 45 minutes later, the second officer returned. He spoke briefly with the first officer, then came over to me. "We checked the cabin," he said. "Looks like it's been empty for years. A bit of vandalism, maybe some camping gear left behind by hikers, but nothing unusual." "Nothing unusual?" I repeated, my voice rising. "What about the stuff tied to the wall? The doll? The fresh fire pit?" He shrugged slightly. "Looked like general debris, maybe someone's weird idea of decoration. Hard to say how old the fire pit was without forensic testing, and we can't do that on suspicion alone. No sign of anyone being there recently. No footprints besides ours in the dust inside." My heart sank. But there were people outside. Footsteps. I heard them. "Could have been animals," the first officer said, stepping in. "Sometimes wildlife sounds more human than you'd think in the dark. Or just your imagination playing tricks after a stressful night." My imagination? I felt a surge of frustration and disbelief. I was chased. There were multiple people. "We did a quick sweep of the immediate woods," the second officer added. "Nothing. It's dense back there. Hard to track anyone without more concrete evidence." No signs of struggle, nothing missing from your car that we can see. Without definitive proof of a crime, there's not much we can do. They were polite, but firm. There wasn't enough evidence. It was my word against, well, against nothing. The man from the truck, the footsteps, the whistling, all gone, leaving no trace the police found relevant. They told me to be careful, to get my car fixed, and suggested maybe sticking to more populated routes in the future. Then they left. I was left alone again on the side of the road, scratched, exhausted, and feeling completely unheard. The cabin was still there, silent and menacing in the distance. The woods loomed. I knew what I had heard, what I had seen, what I had felt. It wasn't animals. It wasn't my imagination. I managed to call a tow truck from the gas station and eventually got my car towed to a garage in the next town. The mechanic found the issue quickly, a relatively minor problem that was easily fixed. By the next day, I was back on the road. But the journey felt different. The open road no longer felt freeing. Every car that pulled up behind me made me tense. Every patch of woods felt like it was hiding something. At night, I kept the lights on, checked the locks multiple times, and strained my ears for any sound out of the ordinary. I finished the trip, but the experience stayed with me. I still see the man's wide, dead eyes, still hear the slow, eerie whistle and the sound of footsteps crashing through the leaves. I never went back to that stretch of road. I don't know who they were, what they wanted, or if they were connected to the strange camp or the man from the truck. The police found nothing, but I know something was out there. Something dark and unsettling, lurking just out of sight in the deep woods. And the thought that they might still be there, waiting, still haunts me.